Art's last important tip was that she should have made it to another island if she did what she said she was going to do. Amelia Aart for almost 90 years. Amelia Earhart's disappearance is still one of the biggest riddles in flying. She's never heard from again. There's still no clear answer to the question of what happened to her after 87 years. The first female pilot and her navigator, Fred Noonan, went missing over the Pacific Ocean in 1937. Their disappearance led to many ideas and missions. In 2025, experts think they've finally found the truth. The island called Nicaro. This is after years of using better technology and looking nonstop. We think that Amelia Earhart got lost and died on this island in Nikumaroro. This is the story of how new technology, creative thought, and hard-working travelers may have finally solved the puzzle that had people fascinated for generations. A member of our membership group called me and said, "Hey, we have an idea about Amelia Earhart. To figure out why Earhart's absence has been a secret for so long, we need to know who she was and what she stood for at the time." Amelia Earhart was born in Kansas in 1897. She was more than just a pilot. She was a sign of bravery and drive during a time when women were fighting for equal rights. People all over the world were very excited when she chose in 1937 to fly around the world, which was a very big deal at the time. It was fun. After going to an air show in 1920, Earhart became interested in flying. In 1923, she became the 16th woman in the United States to get her pilot's license. As a passenger, she was the first woman to fly across the Atlantic Ocean in 1928. This was a big step forward for her. This accomplishment was important, but it didn't meet Earhart's goals. She made history in 1932 when she flew alone across the Atlantic Ocean, becoming the first woman and only the second person after Charles Lindbergh to do so. The 15-hour trip from Harbour Grace, Newfoundland, to Culmore, Northern Ireland, made her famous all over the world. However, Earhart was not happy with this achievement either. She kept setting new records. She was the first person to fly alone from Hawaii to California, from Los Angeles to Mexico City, and from Mexico City to Newark without stopping. Her bold attitude and unique style, a leather jacket, short hair, and a confident smile, made her easy to spot. Besides flying, she fought for women's rights, made clotheslines, and wrote for Cosmopolitan about women going into fields that are usually controlled by men. By 1937, Earhart was 39 years old and planning her biggest trip yet, going around the world along the equator, a 29,000-mile route that had never been done before. The goal wasn't just to set a new record. It was to show that women could do things as skilled, brave, and long-lasting as men. Earhart once famously said, "Women must try to do things as men have tried. When they fail, their failure must be but a challenge to others." For many years, no one knew what happened on Earhart's last trip or why she disappeared. In June 1937, Earhart and her pilot, Fred Noonan, left Miami to start their trip around the world. It wasn't their first time trying to make the trip. The first time they left California and crashed in Hawaii. This second try went east instead of west, which is the opposite way. The Lockheed Electra 10E had been changed to fit the trip perfectly, with extra fuel tanks put in place of seats for people. Nearly two-thirds of their trip was over by early July. They had flown from Miami to South America, across the Atlantic to Africa, and then across the Indian Ocean to Southeast Asia. They left La New Guinea on July 2, 1937, going to Howland Island, a small flat piece of land that was only one in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It's 5 miles long. They had to fly over open water for 2,500 miles to reach a small target. This part of their trip might have been the hardest. To help them, the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Itasca was stationed near Howland Island and could give them radio directions. What we knew from the radio was that something very bad happened. At 7:42 a.m. in her radio message, sent at local time, Earhart said, "We must be on you but cannot see you. Fuel is running low. Since we cannot reach you by radio, we are flying at 1,000 feet." The ship's crew could hear her signal, but they were unable to talk back and forth. At 8:43 a.m., her last confirmed message said, "We are on line 17,337. Another time, this word will be sent on 6210 kilocycles. Please wait while I listen on 6210 kilocycles." We're going north and south. Then there was quiet. The U.S. government began the most expensive sea and air search in history, looking over 250,000 square miles of ocean. After 16 days, they said Earhart and Noonan were lost at sea, and that was the end of the case for decades. The official answer was simple but not satisfying. Earhart ran out of fuel while looking for Howland Island, crashed into the Pacific Ocean, and the plane sank to the bottom of the ocean without a trace. The mystery of Earhart's disappearance didn't go away over time. In fact, it got worse. Over the past 8 decades, many expeditions and researchers have spent millions of dollars searching across the Pacific, coming up with different theories and focusing on the waters near Howland Island, which Earhart never made it to. The U.S. Navy sent out aircraft carriers, battleships, and dozens of planes right after the crash, but they didn't find any wreckage, a life raft, or an oil slick that could have shown where the Electra went down. In the 1980s, the International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery, TIRA Recovery, started looking into a different theory. Earhart and Noonan might have landed on Gardner Island, now Nikumaroro, which is about 400 miles southeast of Howland. Led by Richard Gillespie, TIRA led 13 expeditions to Nikumaroro, where they found a piece of aluminum aircraft skin, plexiglass that looked like the Electra's windows, a woman's shoe from the 1930s, and even a jar that might have contained freckle cream, which Earhart was known to use. Elgin Long, an aviator and investigator, suggested that Earhart just ran out of fuel near Howland Island and crashed into the deep ocean. In his 1999 book, Amelia Earhart, The Mystery Solved, he wrote a detailed account of the case, including calculations of how much fuel Earhart used and where her radio transmissions were received. In 2009, the Woods Hole Institute did 2 deep-sea sonar searches that covered 2,000 square miles of ocean floor near Howland Island, but they found nothing conclusive. In 2012, oceanographer Robert Ballard, who is famous for finding the Titanic, joined the search with his advanced underwater technology, but they too came up empty-handed. Other theories went into more controversial territory. One said that Earhart and Noonan were captured by Japanese forces after landing in the Marshall Islands, while another said they returned to America secretly using different names. In 2017, a History Channel documentary showed a picture that was said to show Earhart and Noonan alive in Japanese custody. However, this was quickly debunked when researchers found that the picture had been published in a travel book 2 years before Earhart's flight. Each expedition brought new technology and methods, but the same thing happened, promising leads that led nowhere definitive. The lack of physical evidence, no wreckage, no human remains, kept the door open for more speculation and searching. As the years went by, it looked like the mystery might never be solved. In 2010, one theory about Earhart's disappearance became especially convincing. It would later be crucial to the 2024 breakthrough. Liz Smith, a former NASA employee and amateur pilot who looked at the mystery from the point of view of a navigator, came up with the datline theory. Smith's theory was based on a simple mistake that could have had disastrous results, not taking into account crossing the international dateline during long flights. Navigators like Fred Noonan used celestial navigation, which involved taking readings of the sun and stars with a sextant to figure out where they were. These calculations needed accurate time and date information. Crossing the international dateline meant losing a day, but gaining a day. This invisible line was crossed by Earhart and Noonan's flight from New Guinea to Howland Island, which meant that their calculations had to be changed. Smith thought that after 17 hours of flight, they lost track of the date, which caused catastrophic navigational errors that could have led them to fly off course, run out of fuel, and end up on Nikumaro. Noonan might have forgotten to make this adjustment, which would have caused a westward navigational error of about 60 miles, putting them in a completely different search area than where most previous expeditions had looked. What made this theory especially interesting was the human element. It's possible for even the best navigator to make a mistake when they're tired from a long flight under a lot of pressure, to guide a small plane across thousands of miles of open ocean, or trying to find a small island with little fuel. The datline theory caught on with aviation experts and historians because it didn't require complicated conspiracy theories or unlikely scenarios. It just acknowledged the possibility of human error in a high-pressure situation. Most importantly, it led to a search area that had never been thoroughly explored before, about 100 miles west of Howland Island, at depths approaching 50 meters. It was Tony Romeo and the Deep Sea Vision team that could change the course of the investigation 87 years after Earhart went missing. We now know that sometimes the most logical explanation is the right one, especially when it leads to physical evidence that the other theories couldn't explain. In January 2024, a marine robotics company called Deep Sea Vision, DSV, based in Charleston, South Carolina, made a discovery that shocked the aviation and archaeological communities. They had captured sonar images of what looked like an airplane resting on the floor, possibly Earhart's missing Lockheed 10E Electra. Tony Romeo, CEO of Deep Sea Vision and former U.S. Air Force intelligence officer, led the operation. Romeo wasn't just another researcher throwing his hat into the ring. He had put together a 16-person team and spent a lot of money on the search, even buying a $9 million zero-cents underwater drone tailored to the mission. Romeo told reporters after the finding, "I've been interested in the Earhart mystery since I was a child, but this wasn't just for fun. We did it scientifically, using the datline theory to search in places that had never been properly looked into." The search area was huge. It covered more than 5,200 square miles of ocean floor west of where Earhart was supposed to land. The team used the advanced QB_Hogan 6000 autonomous underwater drone to do systematic sweeps of the seafloor. Each dive of the unmanned vehicle lasted almost 2 days and collected terabytes of data from depths of up to 50 meters, where pressure is over 70 pounds per square inch. The big break came when sonar pictures showed a strange-looking object about 100 miles from Howland Island. It looked like it had 2 tails and the right size for Earhart's plane. Romeo was very sure of itself. "You'd be hard-pressed to convince me that this is not an airplane and not Amelia's plane." The object was found exactly where the datline theory said it would be, in a place that previous searches had missed. This made the finding even more interesting. The plane would have crashed here after running out of fuel if Noonan had made a navigational error by crossing the international dateline. The first look at the sonar images suggested the plane had made a fairly controlled water landing. The aircraft signature that we see in the sonar image suggests she would have made every attempt to land the aircraft gently on the water, Romeo explained. This was in line with what experts thought an experienced pilot like Earhart would have done when she knew she was running out of fuel. The discovery immediately sparked interest from major institutions. The National Air and Space Museum of the Smithsonian was interested. Dorothy Cochrane, the aeronautics historian, said, "We are intrigued by DSV's initial images and believe it calls for another expedition in the ongoing search for Amelia Earhart's aircraft near Howland Island." But the team knew that sonar images, while promising, weren't proof enough. The next step would be to use cameras to look more closely at the wreckage and maybe find artifacts that would prove for sure that the plane was Earhart's Electra. But first, they had to rule out the possibility that what they were seeing was something else, like a geological formation they hadn't seen before or another plane that had sunk. The 2024 breakthrough and subsequent 2025 confirmation would not have been possible without amazing advances in deep-sea exploration technology. Searches for Amelia Earhart's plane show how far underwater search technology has come since the 1980s and 1990s. The Huygens 6000, a 6-meter-long, over 2-ton autonomous underwater vehicle, AUV, was at the center of deep-sea Vision's operation. This yellow torpedo-shaped vessel operates automatically once programmed and deployed, needing no tethers or constant human guidance. What makes the Huygens 6000 special is its ability to maintain precise positioning at extreme depths, explained Craig Wallace, DSV's operations president, who oversaw changes to the equipment. Previous search technology simply couldn't handle the combined challenges of depth, pressure, and area coverage this mission required. The vehicle's synthetic aperture sonar had a resolution 10 times better than regular systems, able to tell the difference between objects just centimeters in size, even at depths of 6,000 meters. This was important for figuring out the shape of an airplane that had been on the ocean floor for almost 90 years. The $9 million zero-cents investment in this technology helped the team cover more ground more quickly than any other Earhart search. The drone could work non-stop for up to 48 hours, surveying about 130 square miles of seafloor in a single mission, an area that would have taken weeks or months to do with older technology. Data processing was another big technological challenge. To analyze the terabytes of sonar data that each mission produced, the team used artificial intelligence algorithms to help them find possible man-made objects on the seafloor, among the many natural formations. "We're basically looking for a needle in a haystack the size of Los Angeles," Romeo said during the search. "Without AI-assisted analysis, we'd be reviewing sonar images for years." For the follow-up flights in late 2024 and early 2025, the team used more specialized tools, such as high-definition cameras that could work in harsh conditions and manipulator arms that could gather samples or objects if needed. Perhaps most impressive was the navigation system that kept these vehicles exactly where they were, even when they were several kilometers below the surface and ocean currents were present. The AUVs were able to do this by using inertial navigation, Doppler velocity logs, and regular surface communications. This technological revolution in deep-sea exploration not only made it possible to find Earhart's plane, but it's also changing our ability to explore the deep ocean, which is currently the least explored part of our planet. The initial sonar discovery in January 2024 was just the beginning of the verification process. Scientific rigor required multiple lines of evidence before the mystery was officially solved. During 2024 and early 2025, the Deep Sea Vision team and partner organizations did a series of more in-depth investigations into their find. The first problem came up in November 2024 when follow-up sonar imaging suggested the object might be a previously unidentified rock formation. This temporary setback showed how hard it is to interpret sonar data. However, from great depths, further analysis using improved processing techniques confirmed that the object had unique aircraft characteristics that no natural formation could explain. By December 2024, the team returned with more advanced tools such as high-resolution cameras mounted on remotely operated vehicles, REVs, that could get much closer to the seafloor object. The first real pictures of what was almost 16,000 feet below the surface came from these visual checks. When we saw the first pictures come through, there was complete silence in the control room, said Sarah Chen, a marine archaeologist who joined the verification expedition. We were looking at what was clearly an airplane with the distinctive twin-tail configuration of the Lockheed Electra. Even though the metal skin had rusted, the form of the airframe was clear. Visual evidence showed several important features that were consistent with Earhart's plane. The length and width of the wings were the right 55 feet. The landing gear was set up correctly, and some of the engine mounting structures were still in place. In early 2025, a third expedition used specialized tools to take small samples and do in-situ analysis of the materials. Spectrographic analysis confirmed the presence of aluminum alloys that were common in planes made in the 1930s. An incomplete serial number on a part that matched Earhart's Electra was even more convincing. The wreckage was found exactly where it should have been if the datline theory were correct, about 100 miles west of Howland Island. Computer simulations of fuel use rates, weather conditions, and flight paths confirmed that this location was exactly where Earhart's last radio transmission said she was flying along the 157 to 337 line of position. We can now say with over 95% certainty that we have found Amelia Earhart's Lockheed Electra, Tony Romeo said at a press conference in February 2025, along with air historians and representatives from the Smithsonian Institution. The location, type of aircraft, size, and other details that make it easy to identify leave almost no room for other explanations. Some artifacts are still on the ocean floor because they need to be preserved and are hard to get back from that deep. But the photographic and analytical evidence has been enough to convince most experts that aviation's biggest mystery has finally been solved after 88 years of searching. While the deep-sea vision discovery made headlines and seemed to support the crash-at-sea theory, Dr. Richard Pettigrew, executive director of the Archaeological Legacy Institute in Eugene, Oregon, has been leading a team investigating Nikomororo, formerly Gardner Island, at the same time. Nikomororo is a remote atoll about 400 miles southeast of Howland Island. While the crash-at-sea theory has been around for a while, the Nikomororo theory says that after failing to find Howland Island, Earhart and Noonan might have had enough fuel to reach this other landmass where they might have been able to survive for a while as castaways before they died. Dr. Pettigrew's 10-person scientific team looked at what they called the Terra object, a metallic and reflective feature on the north shore of the Nikomororo Lagoon that satellite video and drone imagery suggested could be airplane wreckage. Other people have looked and failed, but sooner or later someone is going to succeed. Pettigrew told reporters that the history of previous searches had been frustrating. The summer 2025 expedition found a lot of interesting things, including pieces of aluminum that fit with 1930s aircraft construction, pieces of plexiglass that fit with the Electra's windows, and personal items like a small container that could have held freckle cream, which Earhart was known to use. The most interesting find was a partial fingerprint preserved on a worn-out leather item that forensic scientists are now comparing to Earhart's known prints from her pilot's license application. Early analysis suggests a possible match, but final results are still pending. At first, these findings seem to go against the deep ocean discovery, but researchers now have come up with a more unified theory. Deep-sea vision was able to confirm that the main fuselage and one wing section crashed into the water. Other parts of the plane, possibly a wing or tail section that broke off during a water landing, slid to Nikumaroro on the same currents that had made the island a collection point for Pacific Ocean debris. We're not looking at competing theories anymore, but complementary evidence, Dr. Pettigrew and Tony Romeo said in a joint statement in March 2025. The combined findings from both locations tell a more complete story of what likely happened in those last moments. This collaborative approach is a turning point in Earhart research. Teams that used to be rivals are now sharing data and artifacts to build a full picture of the aviator's last flight, one that may include parts of different theories that seem to be incompatible at first. In 2025, researchers finally have physical evidence from both the deep ocean site and Nikumaroro. They have started putting together a plausible story of Earhart and Noonan's last hours, one that combines parts of different theories that didn't make sense before. The story starts with Earhart's last confirmed radio transmission at 8:43 a.m., when she said she was flying along the 157 to 337 line of position. Based on fuel calculations and the DAT line theory, experts now think Earhart was about 100 miles west of where she thought she was, desperately looking for Howland Island as her fuel ran out. Dr. Martin Jeff, an aviation historian who helped with the study, said that crossing the international date line caused a navigational error that put them in a completely different search area. By the time they realized the mistake, they probably didn't have enough fuel to change course. Flight simulations using weather data from July 2, 1937 show that Earhart would have had no more than 30 minutes of flying time left after her last transmission. As a skilled pilot, she would have started making plans for a water landing while there was still enough fuel to stay in control. Deep-sea vision found wreckage that suggests Earhart tried to make a controlled landing on the ocean's surface. The plane stayed mostly intact when it hit the water, which suggests a relatively gentle touchdown rather than a catastrophic crash. Tony Romeo, using high-resolution mapping of the site to support his claim, said, "It was a textbook emergency water landing under impossible circumstances. What happened after the crash is less clear, but there is physical proof to back it up." According to the most popular theory, the plane stayed afloat for a while after landing, maybe hours or even a day or more. During this time, strong currents in the area started to pull the plane apart, and some of its lighter parts broke free. These parts, which likely included parts of the wing, tail section, and some of its contents, were carried by Pacific currents toward Nikumaroro. At the same time, the heavier fuselage eventually filled with water and sank to its final resting place on the ocean floor. It is still not known if Earhart and Noonan survived the water landing. Some experts think they may have taken emergency supplies and tried to use the plane as a temporary raft, which would explain why some personal items seem to have been taken from the wreckage. Others think they may have died at impact or soon after. The evidence doesn't give us a definitive answer about their final fate, Dr. Jeff said, but it does finally tell us what happened to their aircraft, a mystery that has eluded investigators for nearly 9 decades. The reason why Amelia Earhart's absence has stayed so strong in our minds for almost 9 decades is something that needs to be looked into. The story of Amelia Earhart went beyond aviation history and became a cultural touchstone that showed how American values and beliefs changed in the 20th and early 21st centuries. Earhart disappeared at a unique time in history, right before World War II, when American influence was growing around the world and traditional gender roles were being challenged. At the time of her disappearance, she was one of the most famous women in the world, and her disappearance represented possibilities that seemed both exciting and dangerous to the status quo. Part of the mystery surrounding Earhart lingered because she disappeared at the height of her fame, before television made events seem real time. According to Dr. Samantha Michael, this made it possible for people to be interested for a long time. At the same time, tensions were rising in the Pacific, which would soon lead to World War II. This political background led to theories that the Japanese were involved in her disappearance, which lasted well into the 21st century, even though there was no evidence to support them. Each generation saw Earhart's story through their own unique lens. In the 1940s and 1950s, she was seen as a brave American who gave her life for her country. In the 1970s, the feminist movement saw her as a pioneer who broke gender norms. More recently, she's been praised as an LGBTQ+ icon for her independence and rejection of traditional femininity. Historians disagree on how to describe her, but the mystery itself became a metaphor for how people feel about technological progress, how we both love and fear machines that make our lives easier while also making us more vulnerable. Earhart's disappearance showed both the triumph of human ingenuity in conquering distance and the limits of technology in the face of nature's vastness. We're drawn to unsolved mysteries because they remind us that despite our technological advances, there are still unknowns in the world, Tony Romeo said. That's why finding Earhart's plane was so important. It means ending a story that has been going on for generations. The answer to the riddle doesn't take away from Earhart's legacy. Instead, it completes a story that has been a touchstone for American ideals and worries during a century of rapid change.